Hello there, this is James Escroft, News 1978, and the atrocity in Atlanta last month really shone a spotlight on the intersection between anti-Asian racism, misogyny, and the dehumanization and even demonization of sex workers, driving home just how damaging and harmful the fetishization of Asian women truly is. After all, far from merely being a preference or a type, no matter how innocent we may believe our own sexual attraction to be, like the fetishization of black men and other interracial relationships, so-called yellow fever, wanting to date and or have sex with Asian women entirely and solely because they're Asian, is rooted in the racist perception of Asian women as subhuman honey traps who are both to be used for the pleasure of and a threat to superior white men. From the perception in the 19th century that Chinese immigrants were a yellow peril, seducing, corrupting and undermining pure, naturally superior Christian white society with opium and prostitution, to the exploitation of impoverished women who were forced into survival sex work by the soldiers who fought in, conquered and or occupied the Philippines, Japan, Korea and Vietnam in the 20th century, white Western cultures, and America in particular, have a long and shameful history of dehumanizing Asian women, depicting them as submissive sexual deviants who are responsible for their own plight. Indeed, just has been the case for all sex workers since the dawn of history, regardless of whether the 6 women deliberately targeted by the Atlanta terrorist were consensual sex workers, trafficked sex workers, or not even sex workers at all. As I mentioned at the end of part 2 of this series, Links down the underbar, many people's first response to the Atlanta terrorist attack was to blame the victims and sympathise with the murderer, buying into his misogynistic bullshit that they were a temptation that he wanted to eliminate, and the police not even charging him with a hate crime because he loved Asian women so much that he wanted to murder them. Because just as is the case with all misogyny, we want everything our own way with none of the responsibility. Whether we have so-called yellow fever or not, we want the women to whom we're sexually attracted to be submissive, obedient and deviant sex dolls who exist to serve us and only us with no consideration for themselves or their own feelings, and who take all of the blame for our abuse and violence when we turn on them and condemn them as whores, just as the model minority must accept all of the responsibility of being the quiet, obedient and hard-working honorary whites, and still take all of the blame for the oppression that they receive without complaint. In fact, the assumption that Asian women are all whores because they're all more sexually active and more easily sexually aroused than white women is so deeply rooted and pervasive in predominantly white societies that anything they do, including walking down the street or drinking a cup of coffee, is regarded as being more sexual and thus as an invitation to creepy men. And I'll never forget the time when, in her attempt to condemn me as a pervert with yellow fever here on YouTube almost a decade ago now, a white woman accused a Korean-American dancer friend of mine of doing a, quote, striptease in a K-pop dance cover that she uploaded simply because she took off her jacket. And ever since then, I've been asking myself, did she call it a striptease because she's Asian, because she's a dancer, or because of some combination of the two? Of course, if you're a dancer here on YouTube, the sickening truth is that this kind of subconscious prejudice is the norm, with dancer often being synonymous with stripper and Asian woman being synonymous with sex work. So although up until now this series has focused entirely on anti-Asian racism, this intersection with misogyny leads us on to the broader issue of the sexualization and objectification of young women and girls of any ethnicity here on the internet, and especially of dancers. answers, as well as to the creepy men who apparently believe that simply uploading a video is an invitation to do anything from flirting with them to demanding lewd content, declaring that you will marry them, and then sending rape and death threats when they say no, because never forget that no matter how much you try to dismiss it as just being on the internet, just a joke or what have you, literally the only difference between that kind of behaviour and the Atlanta terrorist buying a gun and driving all over Atlanta to deliberately murder as many people as he could, one after the other, is simply a matter of degrees.